So try not to stand still. It's hard for me to give you guys an exact heart rate that you need to be at because we're at all different kinds of fitness levels. Kind of the general guideline is around 100 to 110, but that's very just general, okay? I will say about 60% is a good 60% of that heart rate reserve. So if you guys take that formula and plop in 60%, that's usually a pretty good place to be as far as your heart rate's concerned when you do your rest intervals. Okay? But again, perceived exertion might be the best way to gauge that, and we want to be at a very light intensity for our exercise. So at minimum, make sure you're achieving slow movements. The best thing might be just to obviously take the intensity down on the machine, but if you need to just take a walk around the track, walk for a few seconds, or like I said, you can do interval training in the pool. So your lower intensity intervals might be just walking back and forth where you can reach the bottom, and then your high intensity intervals might be going out to the deep end and treading water for 30 seconds. Okay? Okay, frequency. How long should we, or how many days a week should we actually interval train for? 2 to 3 is what we recommend. One study here showed that there's no significant difference, and they were just testing individuals' VO2 maxes that we talked about earlier, the efficiency, the strength of their heart. They found that there's no difference in doing 2 days a week versus 4 days a week. And I'm not talking about fat burn or anything here, I'm talking specifically about VO2 max. So we do recommend at least twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. So the higher the frequency, the smaller the gap is between gain and risk of injury. So again, we talked about going at these higher intensities, increases your risk of injury and decreases your gain. So 2 to 3 days a week is a good frequency to go at. You need to take at least 1 day in between your interval training to let your body recover, to let your body rest. Okay? Similar to strength training, where you put a lot of impact, a lot of stress on those muscles. The same thing happens when you go at high intensities for your aerobic training. You need to take at least a day in between to rest. So beginners, you might want to start with just 1 day of interval training, and then 2 to 3 weeks down the road, work your way up to 2, and maybe get to the point where you can get in up to 3 days a week with your intervals. Okay, just an example here of just kind of a beginner program. 3 types of intervals here would be a 30-second interval, would be a 60-second interval, and would be a 2-minute interval. Okay, so your rest time, for example, for a 30-second interval will be 90 seconds. Your rest time for a 1-minute interval will be 2 minutes. Your rest time for a 2-minute interval will be 3 minutes. Repetitions, if you do 30-second intervals, a good place to start, again, this is for a beginner, would be 6 repetitions, and you can work your way up to 10. 2-minute or 1-minute intervals, 5 repetitions, 2-minute intervals, 3 repetitions, and so on. So you can see here, again, your intensity, your rate of perceived exertion is going to be the highest here with the 30-second interval and the lowest here with the 2-minute interval. Okay? And as it says up there, you guys can manipulate any of these to make the workout easier or to make the workout harder. Okay? You can manipulate the intensity, you can manipulate the rest periods, you can manipulate the repetitions to make these easier or harder. So, beginner program, for example, week 1, they might do 30-second intervals with a 90-second rest. And day 2, and I've got day 1 and day 2, these aren't back-to-back days. Again, this is day 1 during the week, day 2 during the week, the second time you might do your interval training. They might do 60 seconds with a 2-minute rest. The next week, 30 seconds with a 90-second rest, but we've increased our repetitions. Up top, you see we've got 6. The next week, we'll increase our repetitions to 8. Same thing with our 60-second intervals. Up top, we've got repeat 4 times. Here we've got repeat 5 times. Week 3, we've gone ahead and added in a 2-minute interval, 5 times with a 3-minute rest. And then our 30-second interval has increased to 10 repetitions that third week versus 6. Okay? So this is just an example of how you might be able to progress your interval training program. Okay? You can, again, increase the number of repetitions, you can increase or decrease the amount of rest, or you can increase the intensity you do these intervals at. Okay? An intermediate program, so kind of the next level. 30 seconds interval, resting for 60 seconds. So our rest has gone from 90 seconds down to 60 seconds. And our repetitions have increased. We can do up to 12 repetitions if we want. 1 minute interval, our rest has decreased from 2 minutes to 90 seconds, and so on. And we've added in a 3-minute interval here. Okay? Example of a program might look something like this. You've got 30-second intervals, repeat 8 times with a 60-second rest. And down here in week 3, we've gone up to 12 intervals. Okay? So again, you guys can manipulate these however you want with all those components of an interval program. So interval duration, rest duration, interval intensity, frequency, and the number of repetitions to make this harder or to make this easier. And you'll notice that you've got a warm-up. This is very important with exercise in general, but especially if you guys are going to be doing interval training. We always want to make sure we get a warm-up because you're going to be going at very high intensities or higher intensities than your body's accustomed to. So, again, one thing I want to mention, I've mentioned it before, is when I'm talking about the intensity of these intervals, you can make this stuff as structured as you want. I mean, you can get specific heart rates, you can make it an exact science. But I think for the most of you, just try to push yourself to just a little harder than you're accustomed to. Just going off of how you feel. Don't get too caught up in making sure your heart rate's exactly where it needs to be or that you're going close to a maximal effort. I encourage you just to go a little outside your comfort zone in these intervals. And just know that if you do a 30-second interval, you're probably going to need to go a little harder, a little higher intensity than you do for a 2-minute interval. Okay? So, again, with so many people here, I can't necessarily give you right now a specific training program to do. I just want to make sure you guys understand how to progress a program and what you can do to manipulate the intensity of the interval training. Okay, a couple safety precautions here to take note of that I definitely want to mention. Again, I mentioned the warm-up. So you should spend at least 5 minutes warming up to a rate of perceived exertion of about 11 to 13. And again, this is where most of you guys will be doing your typical exercise intensity at. Definitely start slowly and progress slowly. Okay, there's no need to start off that first week doing 6 30-second intervals and then next week turn around and do 12. Okay, it might take you 2 or 3 weeks before you even increase anything. Okay. And then be sure that your rest intervals are easy and long enough. Remember, if you've got 10 intervals, if you're doing 10 30-second intervals, for example, and you go all out those first 2 or 3, you might only make it to number 6 or 7. Okay? So just remember, just like any other exercise, you need to continue to pace yourself. And then pay attention to your body. Again, you're going at higher intensities. It's a different type of exercise. Different type of exercise your body's not accustomed to. So if you start feeling your pain in your knee or pain in your hip or your back starts hurting when you start this type of exercise, you might need to change the mode you do your interval training at. When I say that, I mean treadmill to the full or treadmill to the new step, or you might just need to stop, or high intensity interval training just might not be safe for you. It might not be a practical form of exercise in your exercise program. And then again, we talked about that. We talked about that stream. Make sure that you do get physician's clearance before you start. Really exercise in general, but any type of high intensity exercise. Okay. So with all that said, I don't want to mislead you to think that slow, steady state exercise doesn't have its place in exercise. Okay? It does. Even if you favor high intensity exercise, you still need to try to get in steady state, long duration aerobic exercise. Okay? So for example, if you do the high intensity intervals twice a week, you can still do your steady state exercise 3, 4, 5 more days that week. Okay? So there's definitely a place for both in your exercise program, but it's just a matter of how you mix it in and doing it safely and effectively and practically to meet your goals and those types of things. Okay. I'll open it up to any questions you guys might have. Again, I know that this isn't very specific. If you guys have specific questions about where your intensity should be, where your speed should be on the treadmill or on the bike, please come talk to myself. Please come talk to any of the full-time staff that we have here at the Olympic Center. If you're not a member of the Olympic Center, please feel free to call us and ask for any advice you might have. So I'll open it up to you guys for any questions that you might have. Yes, ma'am.
For specifically running, if you're going to do a 30 or 45-minute run, do you do and you know you're going to do your sprint work, usually do it after the 3 or 5 mile run?
Do it after?
After the run or before the run?
Are you talking about doing both on the same day?
Yeah, well, a light run, a 3-mile run.
I would get your warm up, get your high intensity interval stuff in, and then get your longer run at the end. I mean, you could even split that long run up where you do 15 or 20 minutes before, 15 or 20 minutes after. So, and another thing, if you guys have a hill in your neighborhood, you can use the hill for interval training. You can run up the hill or walk up the hill for a minute to a minute and a half, walk back down for your rest, go up the hill at a little higher intensity, go back down for your rest. So there's all kinds of ways you can do interval training. Questions? You promised me you had a list.
You answered them all. It was such a great presentation.